الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. اللهم ابسط علينا رحمتك وانشر علينا حكمتك وافتح علينا فتوح العارفين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Thank you very much for coming today to attend this class. I hope inshallah it's not very tiring for you, and I will need to ask a few questions before we before we start inshallah, because this is a type of class that needs commitment. Who of you has studied Aqeedah text before? Sisters? Yeah, right. What did you study? Sanusiya. You have studied the Sanusiya. Sughra or this one? This text or the text before this text? Okay, the rational proofs. Good. Right. So, the way we will approach this text, inshallah, is a bit of analytical way and non-conventional way. I mean by a non-conventional way is we will do three things. One, I will request that when you go home, inshallah, you get a copy of Sharh al-Sanusiya, right? You get for yourselves a copy of Sharh al-Sanusiya, and you read, prepare before you come, right? And so that you are ready with questions that we can deal with. Second thing, so that's number one. Number two, what we will be doing is we will be reading the text at the end. So we'll read the sharh, not just the text. What you have here is just the text, the matan, right? With some highlights, with an introduction. But there is nothing else. There is no sharh or anything here. So we will be reading this, and we will be reading the sharh of al-Sanusi himself. And the third thing is we will touch on modern issues that face the studies of Aqeedah, so that we will not be studying this only in a traditional way, but we will be touching on the issues that face us today. Today's session will touch on the definition of Aqeedah and why do we need Aqeedah at all. And then at the end of that session, I will be talking about al-Sanusi, Imam Abi Abdullah Muhammad ibn Yusuf al-Sanusi himself. So first of all, as a preliminary notion that you have here, the early ulama of Aqaid have agreed that Islamic Aqaid did not start as a discursive thing. I mean by didn't start as a discursive thing, there was not much discussion or debate about it. And this should have been the approach to Aqeedah. Aqeedah is something that you submit to people, propose to people, and they take it from you or they leave it. But with time, there was a need to make a discourse about it, because Islam found itself in a position where it is unable to get through to people, either because of misconceptions or because of troubled minds, and so on and so forth. So the first notion that we will talk about today is what is knowledge, right? What is knowledge and why knowledge is important. What is knowledge? Mm-hmm. And I want interaction from you. What is knowledge? You have something there in the notes, so you can read it and you can explain it to me. So what is knowledge? Mm-hmm. What do you have there?
Knowledge, when you realize something is haqq.
What is haqq? I have to play devil's advocate quite a lot today. There is no shame in saying something wrong. Like you're not supposed to know everything. I'm not supposed to know everything. So knowing something is haqq. What is haqq? It's good. So to realize or to know. But what is haqq? Mm-hmm. Have another go.
is, from a morality point of view, when one establishes through instincts.
When one establishes?
Through instincts and experiences.
Okay. Okay, from an epistemological point of view then, from epistemology. Epistemology is the way we know things. From an epistemological point of view, what is haqq? Mm-hmm. Rights. What is proper? Isn't that a moralistic way? So look at this, or reflect on this. Reflect on this. When I say something, I make a judgment, isn't it? When I say something, I make a sentence, that sentence is a judgment. So if I say, for example, we are in Medina Institute, that's a judgment. That judgment is a second act of the mind. What do you mean by second act of the mind? The first act of the mind is conceptualizing things. I had to conceptualize the place, I had to conceptualize people, I had to conceptualize the location, I had to conceptualize the relation between us and Medina Institute, that location, and then finally I made a relation and judged that this relation is a positive relation, that we are in Medina Institute. If it was a negative relation, it would be what? That we are not in Medina Institute. My statement, I can take it and look at the reality out there and then say, yes, this statement is true, or this statement is false. That is called sidq. We call this what? Sidq. So I say, you are sadiq, you're truthful, or you are kadhib, you are lying. Or ghayr sadiq, you're not true. That's not true. So from the perspective of looking at statements, we can judge statements as being true or false. But when we look at the reality, rather than the statement, we can say, this is haqq, or this is not. So when I stand in the middle and look at your statement, right? Your statement, I can judge statements as true or false. But I can't judge, when I judge the reality, I judge it as what? As haqq, right? The word haqq is the stem for the word haqiqah, right? What is haqiqah? Reality, truth of things, isn't it? Haqiqatul ashya, right? And because of that things have an objective reality, right? Things have what? Objective reality. So Imam al-Taftazani says, حقائق الأشياء ثابتة, that things have objective reality regardless of what people say. Some people might say, today for example, we don't know what gender is. But gender has an objective reality, regardless of what people say. Some people might say, we don't know if pain is actually pain. But pain has an objective reality. How do we know that objective reality? That's what we want to know today. So how do we know? Right? And what is knowledge? How do I know that what I know is actually knowledge? Right? So we said there that realizing the truth, the reality, as it actually is. إدراك الواقع على ما هو عليه. That's basically to know that what is outside is there, and the outside that's out there is in compliance with my perception of it. If my perception of it is correct, then I can say this is what? Knowledge, right? This is knowledge. So in order to reach to that knowledge, I have to go through stages. Stage 1, I start with probability or improbability, isn't it? Probability or improbability. So for example, I came in, I looked at this from distance, I thought, what is this that is on the table? Possibly it's a cup, or possibly it's a glass, or possibly it is something else. These possibilities, that possibility is a stage of knowing, isn't it? Is a stage towards knowing. We call this stage probability and improbability. In other words, which one is less probable and which one is more probable. I came closer and then I said, that's possibly 50-50. It could be a cup, it could be something else. That stage of knowing, we call it shak, doubt. So doubt is at-taraddud bayna al-amrayn, is I move between two things, right? Now, when I come close and I have looked at it, I have touched it, I have felt it, and I said, this is definitely a cup. That is what you call knowledge. So knowledge is to realize things as they are. Something which if you come and try to shake, I will say, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. If you say, well, this is not a cup, it could be something else, I will say, I'm really sorry, this is definitely a cup. Now, we know what knowledge is. So knowledge is to realize something as it is. In fact, we call this knowledge, if we can take this word knowledge, ilm, and replace it with any other word, we can replace it with the word yaqeen, certainty. So certainty and knowledge are synonyms in that sense, right? So the opposite of knowledge or the opposite of yaqeen will be something called dhann. You have heard this word before? Dhann. What is dhann? Presumption. I presume. So someone presumes that this room is spacious, but in fact it's not. That's presumption, dhann. In usul al-fiqh, dhann is the opposite of knowledge. So anything that's not knowledge is, or anything that's not yaqeen, that's not certitude, is what? Is dhann. Therefore, but in mantiq, in logic, in aqaid, we are a bit more meticulous. So we say, well, dhann is kind of 50 plus, that's dhann. Or 51 plus, 75 is dhann. But then when we get to 80 or 90, that's ghalabatul dhann, that's strong presumption. If you go to 50-50, that's called shak. If you go less than that, you are more into wahm, imagination. You're imagining, right? And we will mention in a second, how do we know? So yaqeen then is what? Yaqeen or knowledge is to know the truth as it is. Or the unshakable belief, right? Listen to this. Unshakable belief that is in compliance with the reality, that agrees with the reality. If it is unshakable belief, but it is not in compliance with reality, we would call this i'tiqad, aqeedah. So aqeedah is unshakable belief, right? You can actually, it's unshakable, but it does not necessarily have to be in agreement with the reality. For example, a person believes that, the word Atlas? The word Atlas comes from Greek mythology. They used to believe that there was a god called Atlas who was punished by the Greek gods and was commanded to carry the earth on his back, right? That's why they call that the geographical atlas takes from that. So that's a belief. That belief that this earth is carried by an atlas or by the atlas is unshakable belief to some. It's wrong. It's not in compliance with reality. So aqeedah, regardless of what aqeedah is, it could be Muslim aqeedah, Hindu aqeedah, Christian aqeedah. For example, Christians believe that Jesus died on the cross. That's their i'tiqad, isn't it? That's why you can say false aqeedah. Right? They have a false aqeedah and true aqeedah. But when it comes to ilm, when it comes to knowledge or yaqeen, you either say that this yaqeen is not in compliance with reality, you wouldn't call it yaqeen then. If it's not in compliance with reality, you wouldn't call it yaqeen, you wouldn't call it ilm. You would call it something else, right? So that's what knowledge is. Now, how do we know? How do we know? So we know now two things. Number one, we know what Aqeedah is. It's a judgment, it's an unshakable judgment that is not necessarily based on evidence, it's not it's not necessarily in compliance with reality, it's something that you believe. Right. While yaqeen is an unshakable belief that is in compliance with reality. Where did it come from? It came from, they said, from the word yaqana al-ma. When water settles in a basin, we say yaqana al-ma, it is settled. Because when knowledge settles in the heart, it settles only after you have known it through evidence and proof, through a process, a mental process. Now, this process of knowing starts with something called ma'rifah. So ma'rifah leads to what? Ilm. So what is ma'rifah? Ma'rifah is the first step of knowing, while ilm is the outcome of that. So when I say you need to know, it doesn't mean that now you have that. It means you need to move towards ma'rifah. Every human being has that duty. Now, how do we know? Right? So they say المعرفة تختص بما يحصل من الأسباب الموضوعة لإفادة العلم. So معرفة is taking the means to knowledge. It is taking the means to knowledge. So they said اليقين من صفة العلم فوق المعرفة. So yaqeen is definitely higher than معرفة. So we have معرفة. And then we have something called diraya. So for diraya is deeper knowledge of something. So for example, you say أنا على معرفة بكذا. I have a bit of knowledge of, meaning I know that possibly it exists. I know that there is a science called grammar. I know that there is a place called Medina Institute. But if you have dealt with Medina Institute and you have attended their courses, then you can say أنا على دراية. I have diraya of how do they run their activities and so on and so forth. But if you say أنا على علم, I have proper knowledge, it means you have had the expertise that no one can shake regardless of what they come with. Now, this is what knowledge is. And this is what Aqeedah is. We know the difference now? Right. So how do we know? The method leading to this realization. How do we get to this realization? First of all, we said that this realization has to be true, isn't it? So if it has to be true, it has to be unshakable, it has to be based on evidence. This evidence, this proof, has to itself be true. Otherwise, I can't base a certainty on presumption. I have to base my certainty on what? On certainty, and then certainty, and then certainty. So the first certainty is that I exist. This book, which I advise people who are interested in logical proofs to read, 5 Proofs of God, talks of 4 types of change. We have something called qualitative change, we have something called substantial change, and then we have something that is called location change, and we have something called quantitative change. So if we look, if I leave this coffee for another half an hour, what will happen to it? It will become cold. That's called qualitative change. If we look outside and it is raining and there is a little pond, and after half an hour it kept raining, we look at that, the size of the pond will become big. That's quantitative change. If you have a fly and you swat it, it will die and it will decompose. That's called substantial change. If you look outside and it is autumn time and then tree leaves are falling, that's location change. What happens is that the universe completely is full of what? Changes. Well, you might think this is an outward change. The fact that you have made that decision that the leaf has fallen down, that's a change itself. The fact that you were not aware of something and now you say, I'm aware of it, that's what? That's a change. So we have to start realizing that that's a change. Then I identify what is a change. What is a change? We will see later on that a change is in essence an actualization of a potential. Something has to have two potentials. The tree leaf has a potential of remaining up or falling down. The actualization of that potential is what? Is the change. And for something to be actualized when it was a potential, it has to have an actualizer. Someone to push it from one potential to another, isn't it? So you see how knowledge is built. Knowledge is to be built from methods that are true and definitive. Otherwise, we will be basing our realization on dhann, conjecture, presumption. Right. Now, when we look at knowledge, and that knowledge is something very precious because it makes us able to have definitive answers to life, to our existence, then we have two duties in face of that. Duty number one is when we seek to know, when we try to know, we have to have a clear method that is free from whim and fancies and desires. What they call in academia, objectivity. Obviously, it doesn't have reality in academia, but we have to be objective. The Quran promotes that. And I promised that I will not give you a conventional understanding, but I will be hinting at how the Quran actually is in agreement with the intellectual methods of seeking truth. So the Quran says, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِيلُوا. If you hate someone, your disliking of them should not debar you, should not stop you from being fair with them. Fairness means you turn off your personal judgment of a person and you switch on all the biases and be able to realize them. And this is in the core of the tradition, because the tradition was based on someone coming with an idea. That idea has survived challenge. And after so many centuries of surviving challenges, they said, well, we accept this idea. They didn't just accept an idea. In fact, the strength of an idea lies in its being able to survive challenges and discussions after so many years. So the method has to be clear. You have to have a clear method. How did you arrive at that conclusion? And secondly, there has to be a commitment to the method. Sometimes at certain points, we have a clear method, but what happens? We start drifting away from the method. So I apply the method to my relatives and I don't apply it to myself. Or I apply it to my enemies, but I don't apply it to myself. Sometimes it's obstructed. The method is obstructed by challenges. For example, we talk about fairness, and when a husband and wife, for example, have a disagreement, fairness completely disappears. Right? So the method leading to realization brings with it two duties. That we have to have a clear method, and then we have to have that commitment to truth, or to that method. Now, how did Muslims develop a methodology? How did Muslims develop a methodology? Muslims had two things in order to develop a methodology. First, there was an incentive. We mean by an incentive, there was an encouragement from the texts saying to them, you have to have a methodology of reaching the truth. So this book of Aqeedah, al-Sanusiya, is actually telling you at the very beginning, اعلم أن الحكم العقلية ينحصر في ثلاثة أقسام. Know that rational judgments are limited to three categories. What's that? It's a book of Aqeedah. He did not say to you, you got to believe that there is a God. He said to you, you got to know that there are three rational judgments. So you see the first word? No. You got to know. And this is a defining factor, characteristic of the concept of faith in Islam that makes it different from other Abrahamic faiths. That it is it's linked to knowledge. To believe is to what? Is subsequent to what? To know. In Christian scriptures, faith is trusting God. This is what Martin Luther said. He said, faith is to trust. In Islam, we develop that trust only after we have known. So faith in Islam does not mean that Muslims are affirming their beliefs, but rather they are bearing witness or even recognizing facts after having received knowledge. So that's why we make our pronouncement of faith after we have recognized facts. So a Muslim regards the contents of his creeds as facts, not theories, as realities in the universe, not as beliefs in his mind. Faith, Iman, when we define it, is what? Is at-tasdeeq, is acceptance. Isn't it? So we say, what is faith? What is Iman? Iman in our understanding is to accept. To accept means you have made an intellectual engagement with the truth or with the reality, and you have looked at different options, and you have verified each one of them, and finally you came with the conclusion that I accept this and I reject that. Because when I say faith is acceptance, it means I reject something else. So it is not just the ability to trust, but it's the ability to trust after you have realized that something is true. It is basically positive knowledge acquired by free will, as Imam al-Taftazani mentions it. So there is an incentive that faith does not allow submission to ideas without subjugating them to research and backing it with definitive proofs. We will see, inshallah, in our discussion of Sanusiya, how Imam al-Sanusi talks about the iman of al-muqallid, the iman of a person who imitates, meaning just born into a Muslim family, so you just imitate without verifying the truth yourself, and how dangerous that is. The very fact that Muslim scholars discussed that, and they said, will the iman of a person who just took it by birth, is it enough to save him from hellfire? The fact that they spoke about that shows you how valuable is human mind to them, and how respectful they were for the human attempt to reach truth. And unlike fiqh, Aqeedah does not accept imitation. In fiqh, you can imitate. Why? Because fiqh is much smaller circle. The ijtihad in fiqh is much smaller, while Aqeedah is an individual duty. If we can say that ijtihad in fiqh is a collective duty, ijtihad in Aqeedah is an individual duty, meaning you have at least to know A or B or C of your Aqeedah, that no one can come and shake your faith so quickly like that. So you have to make that endeavor alone. There is no set way of doing it, because it varies according to where you live. So is someone in the desert is different from someone in England. Someone who has higher education is different from someone who has no education. But everyone, regardless of their qualifications, they have to take a step to know what do they believe in and why do they believe in it. Is that clear? So that's the incentive. What about the composition? What is the composition of the Muslim methodology of finding knowledge? How do we know that things are as they actually is? They say that there are two types of information. Knowledge is dealing with what? With information, right? When I look at this writing on the wall, part of the information that it gives me is that it is written in both Arabic and English. That's a piece of information in terms of the language. That it is on the wall. That's in terms of location. That it's actually in blue. One is in dark blue and navy blue, and the other is in light blue. That's in terms of color. That it is symmetric or non-symmetric. There is loads of... I translate what's in the world into what? Into what? Information. That information is either information that comes to me through transmission, meaning it's not something that I made. So I met Brother Ismail earlier today, and he said something to me. So I started communicating what he said, that information that he gave me. My duty, that information, my duty or your duty to know towards this information is to know that it is verifiable and being traceable to the person who said them. So the first composition, if you are transmitting, then you need to authenticate. If I say so-and-so said that to me, I'm not discussing the content of what he said. What am I discussing? That he actually said. Next step is the content. But the first is to say that what he said, that he said what he said. If someone says that, for example, the government has decided to raise people's wages with 20%, I'm not going to discuss whether 20% is a good amount or a bad amount. I'm going to say where the first question is where did you get this from? Right? So my first duty with information, if I'm transmitting the information, is to authenticate. So I have to provide the person with the source and make sure that this source is not a fake website. It's actually an official website, or it's in the news, or it is in, right? So the first way of dealing with information is transmission. So research in transmission is restricted to verifying the relationship between between information and its source. What if I am making a claim? So let's say, for example, the second step. I said that so-and-so told me, now they go, and that person is they go to the source, and they want to discuss. So I claim that the writing on the wall is in red. That's a claim, right? That's a claim. You can challenge that claim, and you challenging of that claim, I have to prove to you whether my claim is correct or not. So if I am making a claim, then my method of seeking knowledge or the methodology should lead me to find an evidence or a proof. So apply that to our faith. Muslims say that Allah is one. Who told you? My parents. Who told your parents? Their teachers. Who told their teachers? Their teachers. Who told their teachers? Their teachers. And you keep going back. Right? You have not made that claim yourself. Someone else made that claim. Who made that claim? Who made the claim? The Prophet ﷺ and previous prophets. Then you go back and when you arrive at that point, you have to defend why is that claim correct. Why do I have to believe the Prophet in him saying that? So you deal with a completely different set of proofs that are not to do with authentication. Authentication gets us to the main. But if I'm the maker of the claim, then I'm not dealing with authentication. I'm actually dealing with evidence. I have to prove So everyone quoting, he's either quoting from somebody else or he is claiming himself. Unless you make the claim your own claim. So when you say, I believe that God is one, then I say to you, what is your proof for this? Right? So you can reach the same conclusion in two ways. You can say, well, I make that claim because someone else told me. Why do you believe them? Because they're trustworthy. Why do they believe the one before them? Because they're trustworthy. Then you go to the original person and say, why are they trustworthy? Right? Why should we believe them? So, when we dealing with claims, research is restricted to evidence. But there is very important issue here to deal with. That the evidence you quote for proving a specific claim has to be in agreement with the claim. i.e., there is something called the scope of the claim. You can't prove something that is material by referring to non-material evidence, or non-material by referring to material evidence. Abstract. So the logicians said, if I want to prove to you that this is blue, is this an abstract or material? Huh? It's a material thing, isn't it? How do we prove to a blind person that what I see is blue? How? By referring to faculties, isn't it? Hawas, our five senses. He doesn't have that sense, I have that sense. That's a sensual knowledge. But how do we prove to people that a whole is bigger than its half? That's an abstract thing that exists only where? In our minds. So when I want to prove that a whole, remember, a whole is bigger than its half, is an abstract. But when I bring an apple, I say, look, that's an apple. I cut it in half and I say, here you go. Is the whole apple bigger than half of it? Yes. This is a representation of abstract. It's not abstract. When I say 2 is bigger than 1, and then I bring 2 apples, and I say, look, 2 is bigger than 1. That's a representation of the abstract. Numbers are abstract. Numbers are not tangible. You can't bring to me 1 as a 1. You bring me a representation of 1. You bring me a representation of 2. You bring categories. Categorizing things is also abstract. It only exists in the mind. But in reality, it's a representation of it. Right? So if I am asking for an abstract meaning, then the evidence has to be abstract, has to be rational. If I am looking for a material evidence, it has to be tangible. If I am making a civil claim, for example, claiming that so-and-so owns this house, the evidence that is required can't be rational, can't be sensual. Because if it's sensual and this house is occupied by somebody else, I say, oh, here you go. Somebody else lives there. But that evidence is wrong because it is irrelevant. What would be the evidence that I need here? Legal documentational evidence, isn't it? So that documentational evidence has been decided by people. The people in this land have decided that a land registry is the official body that can tell if someone owns a specific place or not. Possibly somewhere else, it could be verified by another method, right? So when we look for evidence, the evidence or the proof has to be in agreement with the claim that I am making. Therefore, when people try to prove evolution by referring to empiricist evidence, that's incoherent. Why? Because if I'm walking down the street and I stumbled into a fossil of something and tests have shown that it lived 7,000 years ago, I'm not sure actually, I'm not really sure that it actually lived 7,000. This still belongs to what? To unseen. These machines have proven to fail in tests, and there is always a margin of mistake. So to say that this is conclusive or definitive, that's wrong. I might say the maximum I can make is it's a claim. Claim equals what? Theory. Claim and theory are the same. It's a theory. A claim is basically a way of looking at reality. That claim is verifiable or not verifiable. Once it's verifiable and conclusive, then it becomes a knowledge, certainty. But all of that is what? Is a theory. As much as, brothers and sisters, our aqeedah, when they are not provable yet, they are what? A theory. Creationism, to people who do not believe in the Quran, is what? It's a theory. We only believe in creationism because we believe that the Quran is telling us the truth. And why is the Quran telling us the truth? Because we have verified by other evidence and proofs that the Quran is truthful. So we had to go through a lengthy loops until we came to that conclusion. So a claim is not considered until an evidence until an evidence that suits it in nature is attached to it. Unsuitable evidence is of no value. If someone brings me a tangible evidence to prove a legal claim, I will say, thank you very much. That is not what I am looking for. Right. So we know now what Aqeedah is. We know now what Aqeedah is. So we said that Aqeedah therefore is this unshakable belief that is not necessarily based on evidence. That's Aqeedah. But once it is based on evidence, then it is knowledge. And in Islam, i'tiqad, Aqeedah, has to be subsequent to what? To knowledge. You can't say, I believe, unless you have said, I know. We read in the Quran, فَاعْلَمْ فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. He did not say, فَأَيْقِنْ. He did not say, believe. He said, no. Which means the Quran is requesting from you what is within your reach, what's accessible to you, that I can. Right. So why do we need to know? What is it that makes us very particular? What is it that makes us very particular? First of all, we need to understand that human beings are different from animals, isn't it? Human beings are different from animals. Animals have desires, and we also have desires. Animals have instincts. These instincts make them stop when their desires are fulfilled. So, for example, if a donkey is eating, its instinct will tell it, now you're satiated. That's it. But these instincts do not stop them from transgressing against each other. They have no law. There is no law of ownership in the animal kingdom. There is no law of marriage in the animal kingdom. There is no laws and regulations. There is no law of halal, permissible, and haram, impermissible. There is no law of any of that within the animal kingdom. So animals and humans, they normally share instinct and they share desires, but they do not share intellect. So animal first. Animal will is related to its instinct. So the animal will stop eating when its instinct tells it stop. But human beings, they look at the sun and it's about to settle down and darkness is coming in, and they will say, we can eat. That has nothing to do with instinct. That has nothing to do with desire. What does it have to do with? It has to do with rules and regulations. Who is addressed with rules and regulations? Our intellects. So the question is, with our intellects, we make judgments, we make decisions that might be completely missed by our instinct. For example, you see in front of you a glass of juice. You're thirsty, you like it, but then all of a sudden someone dropped poison inside it. If you give that to an animal, will it drink it? Yes, it will. But human beings will not. Why? They have made a decision. What is that decision based on? It's based on understanding the benefits and the harms. This is going to be harmful to me. Is harm something embedded in the drink? Tangible? It's untangible. It's rational. So as human beings, we make decisions based on what? On our rationality. Now, our knowledge of our surroundings moves into our minds. And our minds make sense of the world around us. When they make sense of the world around us, what they do, they build standards, isn't it? Our minds build standards. Whether these standards are good or bad, right or wrong, but they build standards. And based on these standards, we proceed with what is around us. These standards that move our emotions, that dictate our decisions, that guide our way, is what we can call i'tiqad or aqidah. So we defined aqidah from the perspective of truth or false, and now we define aqidah from the perspective of human behavior, from a moralistic perspective. So i'tiqad, if someone, for example, believes that humans have to be very free, and that is the most important thing, they will not bother about modesty. Because in their paradigm, in their understanding, in their ladder of priorities, freedom comes before modesty. So it is not an issue of discussing whether modesty is good or bad. It's an issue of discussing what comes first. What should take priority in the human discussion? As human beings, what is more valuable? Being free or being modest? What is closer to our humanness? If someone, for example, believes that revolution is the way to fix injustice in the society, the discussion shouldn't be whether revolution is or is not. The discussion is to do with good and evil. Who is in charge? Is evil a necessity in this world or not? How do we perceive evil? Whose responsibility is it to fix evil in the society? Can we aspire for a world that is evil-free? Right? Because it's all triggered by that. Now, what is in our mind, what moves our decisions, is our knowledge of our surroundings moves through these minds, and that's what we call aqeedah. Now, there are three routes through which we build our conviction, through which we build our certainty, through which we make our standards. The first of these is something called the sensual realization. I mentioned before that we look at things with our faculties and we take these images. Our ears can hear the sounds. Our eyes can see images. Our mouth can taste things. Our nose can sense, can smell, and our hands can touch. What happens? These are like informants. They all inform the inward power of human beings. That inward power of human beings, and I'm going to come out of this presentation for a second to show you something else that's a bit relevant. Yes, here we go. This image will be of benefit here. So what happens is we have how many senses? 5 senses. These 5 senses, what do? They deal with the world outside. They collect information, and these information create inside a phantasm. So when you see an image, when you see a flower, there is a phantasm, there is an intellectual image of that flower. It remains inside. When you smell something and you say, this is a sweet smell, there is an image of that sweet smell. There is like a carbon copy of that sweet smell inside your brain. When you hear some voice and it's a nice voice, remember that there are varieties of nice voices, that they are different from each other. Every time you hear one, you scan it and it's inside. That's the phantasm. That phantasm goes through some power, internal power called imagination. We imagine, what is it that makes it sweet? What is it that makes it nice? What is it that makes it beautiful? And we start through that's the sensuous memory. The sensuous memory is the one that looks at the qualities, the sensual qualities. In a flower, remember that in a flower, for example, there are loads of things that are completely irrelevant. But what is sweet about it is the smell and the look. So our sensuous memory selects. And once it selects, it sends to something called synthesizing sense. This synthesizing sense brings things together. After it has been dissected and analyzed, it brings them together and makes something that is called an essence. So the essence of a flower, of a beauty in a flower, is something that is free from all external unnecessary qualities. When I say a beautiful door, or a nice door, or a strong table, that quality of strength is the essence or the outcome of the imagination, the sensuous memory, and finally I have come with an essence. The essence is stored in something called the instinct. It's an internal power. With that instinct, the phantasm has what? Has been processed through the imagination, the sensuous memory, the synthesizing sense, the instinct, and I have now the essence of a flower, the essence of a voice, the essence of a door. I may see a different flower that I have never seen before. And as soon as I look at it, I say, that's a flower. How did I make that decision even though I have not seen that specific flower before? How would I look at a key and say, that's a key? How do we build these judgments? Through experience, right? But what happens through experience is this deconstruction and construction. Deconstruction, construction, deconstruction. We're doing that spontaneously, without thinking, without deep interaction. But what happens? It happens at the back of our minds. That's what we call knowledge. That's what we call experience. So, from our experience, for example, we link causes to effects. How did we make that? From experience. We understood the concept of pain, even though pain can come in different ways and different forms, but it's pain. So we made the essence of pain through different experiences. Now with our instinct, we look at it, that's painful. How do we associate pain with a specific experience that we have not yet gone through? Because we have used our minds. And because in the back of our minds we have essence. Everything in this universe has one essence. It can't have two. If it has two, then we'll be confused. Which one to go with? When we define, we normally go after the essence, right? Now, that essence is what will help us to make a concept. So what's the concept of a book? So a concept is basically the essence plus the word in language. So when I had the essence, and then I chose a word in language and I associated with it. That's a book. So a book, as a linguistic word, might have a meaning, but as a technical word, is a concept. It's a concept. Therefore, when we differ, we try to identify the concepts. Now, in order to build these concepts, in order to build this knowledge, this conviction. So for example, when I say morality, when I say modesty, when I say oneness, when I say possible, impossible, tangible, non-tangible, all of these concepts, and I say, well, I believe that two contradicting things cannot exist simultaneously. Why? Because that's impossible. Then you have a concept of impossibility. So we have sensual realization. Sensual realization, that's one method of knowing. We have faculties. We realize that we exist. We realize that this ceiling is on top of us, that this floor is beneath us. That's sensual knowledge through faculties. The faculties send their images to the mind, and then the mind makes realization. That's sensual certainty. Sometimes, as I said before, the knowledge is not a sensual one. It's a rational one. It's something that does not have a reality outside. For example, 5 by 6 is what? 30. So where is the 5 and where is the 6? It only exists in your mind. You might bring me 5 apples and bring 6 sets of 5 apples and say, here you go. That's a representation. But me knowing the abstract in my mind, or if, for example, the door knocked at the back of my mind, I say, who is it? I ask a question that has nothing to do with the knocking of the door. I ask a question about a human existence. Who is it? So why did I make that link? Why did I spontaneously realize that a knock of a door indicates that someone must have knocked? Or something must have moved something from one place to another. That is what we call rational realization, analysis. That's only particular to human beings. So from analysis, we come to conclusions, and this conclusion is verifiable. How do we verify it? Through experience again and again and again. Then we come to realization, that's certainty. But sometimes the knowledge that we receive is neither sensual nor rational. It is something that comes from somewhere else, because we don't live alone in this world. So someone came back from Hajj and he told me that he was just in Mecca. That's a transmission. That's a narrative. I know this person. I know that he doesn't have any reason to lie to me. Why should he? But my belief of that person might be shaken if another person came and he said, he's never been to Mecca. There is nothing actually called Mecca. But if I have 1,000 people coming from different places who are not related to each other, and they come and tell me, here you go, by the way, we have been all to Mecca, then I have to believe them. Why do I have to believe them? Because of the massivity of their narration. Their narration is a massive narration. We call this in hadith mutawatir. So mutawatir is something that cuts any doubt. Watara in Arabic, watara means to cut. Witr is called witr because it's the last prayer of the day. So it cuts any doubt. And we have to believe that. Why? Because if we refuse massive narrations, then we will not believe anything. If someone tells you that your mom and dad have got married, how would you believe them? You can't say, well, here I am. Well, possibly you're adopted. Isn't it? Possibly you're adopted. But the fact that there is so many people and they can produce evidence. If someone tells you that there was something called World War II, how would you believe that? Oh, there are the massive amount of studies that have been done on that subject. The agreement and the disagreement, the memorials, and all of these stories about it prove that there must have been. Simultaneously, we believe in the existence of our Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because of the massive number of books that describe. People can't just be describing an imaginary personality. No one would spend all his life writing about an imaginary personality. If it's one person, 2 people, 3 people, fine. But that massive number of people proves. So narrative realization, massive narrations are truthful. And when we say they are truthful because of the numbers. Once the numbers are so small, then we can look into a different way of verifying. That different way of verifying is we look at the dignity and the integrity of the person. Is the person trustworthy? Is he adl? Is he someone who can tell false things and stuff like that or not? And that narration is called ahad, isn't it? Ahad, solitary narration. Normally solitary narrations in anything does not lead to definitive knowledge. What does it lead to? It leads to probability. Any hadith, sahih hadith, is authentic, yes, but it refers to what? Dhann, probability. High likelihood. You know what is the benefit of that? The benefit of that is to be able to embrace as many people as you can. Because if it was definitive and people said we don't believe it, they're out of the fold of faith right away. But the fact that you say it is based on probability. So if a person denies it, yes, it is bad, because you are now accusing a line of trustworthy people in their own integrity. That's bad. But we can't just kick you simply out of the realm of faith like that. That's number one, benefit number one. Number two, it allows space for disagreement. Because if it's a verifiable hadith narrated by one person, two people, you might say, I believe them. I might say, well, I have actually an issue with so and so and so and so, and I don't believe it. So it allows difference of opinion. That's why you would find a difference of opinion in fiqh based on solitary narrations. No one disagrees with the mutawatir, which is understood only in one way. But what if it's a mutawatir understood in different ways? Someone might say, I thought it could mean this. I thought it could mean that. So I do not disagree with the fact that it has been said. But I disagree with your claim that it should be understood this way. See? So I don't have an issue with authenticating it, but I have an issue with your claim that it should be understood in that way. Now, moving from what is Aqeedah, what does Aqeedah tell us? And why is it so important? Aqeedah is so important because it answers the three big questions. Human beings have three questions to ask. Some people decide not to ask the questions. That's absolutely fine. But they have to claim responsibility for not asking the questions. You can't just get into a train and you know that this train is going somewhere and you don't know where is it going, and you just get into the train without asking what's the destination of this train. It might end up somewhere else. It might not actually be leaving the station at all. So you have to ask, where is this train going? So whether we're Muslims or non-Muslims, small or big, once we have completed our faculties, i.e., we have our functioning intellect, we are able to realize the world around us. If we have any of that damaged, so we don't know, we have no sense of anything, fine, we're excused. Like a child who places all his trust in his mother and she takes him into the train, the child is not going to stop the conductor. I say, where is this train going? But if we are fully functioning adults, we call it mukallaf, fully functioning adult, then we need to ask, definitely we need to ask these questions. What are these questions? Is obviously, I have not existed in eternity, meaning I have a date of birth. So there was a time where I did not exist, which means my life is a change. It's an actualization of a potential. What was that potential? That A can be born or not. So the fact that someone has pushed me from the potential A to potential B, that I was not here, now I am here, that means my whole life being a potential, someone must have pushed it. So who brought me here? Who made that move? Who have made the decision? Well, my parents. Yes. But my parents themselves is another potential. Their life is a potential. So we keep going and going and going and going and going until we reach a point where we will say, so who brought us here? And if someone brought me here, it means that person or that individual or that creator is intelligent. Intelligent means he doesn't do things haphazardly. The fact that he moved me from there to here, from non-existence to existence, from a space to another space, it means they are not the same. Right? Otherwise, he could have left me there. What's the point? We as human beings perceive that our actions are wise actions, meaning they have purpose. There is a purpose. Let me show you something that again might not be directly relevant but might help you. Afwan. Yeah. Mm-mm. Yes, possibly this one. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a book by Rupert Sheldrake. It's called Science Set Free, or in America they call it the 10 Myths of Science. Rupert Sheldrake, who's a biologist in Oxford, says the standard scientific view is that both cosmic and biological evolution are purposeless. There is no purpose in evolution. Basically, it's mutations, isn't it? It's mutations based on stages. This stage, this was the best mutation. Okay, it goes on. The fact that the universe is just right for life, at least on Earth, as in the anthropic cosmological principle, does not mean that the universe as a whole has any purpose, so they claim. Among countless universes, it just happens to be the one that has the right condition for life. From a scientific point of view, the recognition of purpose or goal of plants, animals opens up a deeper understanding than a mechanic approach can offer. Without a wider sense of purpose, our lives seem futile. There is no point in our life. So the question that we should ask is, how do you know that there is no purpose in nature? Is it an assumption? Right? Is it an assumption? And if there is no purpose in nature, how can your question be of purpose? Right? The question that life has no purpose, then how can we know that this question that is being asked is what? Has purpose. There will be no purpose at all. So who brought me here? Then the question that follows is, what's the purpose? Why did he move me from non-existence to exist? Why did he bring me from one presence to another? And thirdly, so I am here and I can see with my senses that people come and go. Where do they go? Where do they go? No one has ever come back to tell us. It is a metaphysical thing that we can only know about from a different source. So where do they go? And what happens to them? Some people die in young age. Some people die in old age. Some people die after living a life of ease. Others live a life of difficulty. Some live a life of transgression. Others live a life of poverty. Some suffer. Some just have it easy, the easy way. So what is after this journey? These questions faced by human beings, people have three approaches of dealing with them. One is to live in confusion and worry. The person keeps thinking. He gives himself or herself up to just thinking. So they live in a dilemma. They keep asking questions. Remember that a question mark should lead to an apostrophe and then full stop. It should lead to a full stop. It has to be a full stop. Your life can't just end with a question mark. That's wrong. You can't just keep asking questions unless you are seeking an answer. So some people keep asking and they live perplexed life. There is another person, another approach who decide, I can't be bothered. This is just life. Let me live today and I can die tomorrow. It doesn't really make a big deal. Well, but it does make a big deal. because you live in deception. One of the elements of that deception is this is going to be the case all the time. But that's not going to be the case. You will have to face the outcome of your life one day. No one has ever escaped death, right? No one has escaped that destiny. No one has managed to run away from the angel of death and fool him and say, okay, I'm not following you. So push these questions away. But there is a third approach which seems to be more practical, that is to answer these questions and to go out and find. And once you have done that, you have the ma'rifah, then you have a methodology, and you applied that methodology, and you committed to that methodology, you reach that knowledge. That knowledge would lead you to i'tiqad, and that i'tiqad that's based on knowledge will make you live in happy life. Why? Because you realize, first of all, the nature of this world. You realize that it's a temporary world, and that it's full of trouble and issues and challenges. So when something bad happens, you will not be surprised. You know, when people have that emergency plans, when there is risk or there is a failure. Imagine if we are in a building and there was electricity cut. If people know that it is possible that electricity will fail and they have an extra generator and they quickly connected the extra generator, people will not feel the pain. So why do people feel the pain? Because we go back, not only because of the painfulness of the experience, but because of the absence of conviction. Possibly they have the complete different image of what life is. So we need to go back and say, by the way, life is not like this. Why do people fall into frustration and depression? Because it goes back to possibly they were building certain plans about life or having a certain image and it didn't work their way. So people fall into depression. Were they to build a different way or to understand life in a different way, they wouldn't have fallen into that. So these three questions: who brought me here? What is the purpose? What is after this journey? The answer is, what's the answer? Who brought me here? Huh? Who brought us here? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the question that follows, how do you know that He brought you? Right? That question, how do you know that He brought you, will bring about a plethora of answers. One answer is proving that He actually exists. Right? And that's a question that we'll be studying in Aqeedah in our text. And secondly, what's the purpose of Him bringing you here? There is a wisdom. Right? There is a wisdom. So the question is, how do you know that He has a wisdom? Then the question that follows that, how do you know that He has a wisdom, will mean that you look into His attributes. So the first question is Allah. And then what's the proof that He exists? Then you will talk about His existence, that He exists without a beginning, He continues to exist without an end, isn't it? And then how do you know that what's the purpose? Oh, there is definitely a purpose. Why does He have a purpose? Because He's knowledgeable. You can't imagine a God who is ignorant. How would He be ignorant and yet He dictates knowledge? Knowledge and ignorance are contradictions. And that He is powerful. Because if He's not powerful, then He is limited. And if He's limited, I'll be like Him. Or He'll be like me. So we look into that whole discussion. And then, what is after this journey? What do you say? What's after this journey? Oh, there is another life. What's the purpose of that other life? Oh, there is punishment and reward. So that punishment and reward will take us back to what? Will take us back to personal responsibility. Right? Personal responsibility. Actions of human beings. Are my actions punishable? Yes, they could be punishable as much as they could be rewardable. There is a big difference between making someone smile and making someone sad. There is a big difference between giving someone charity and stealing. They are not the same. Giving and taking are two different things, two different potentials, right? So we answer these questions and then we talk about human responsibility. So, I'm responsible for my actions. But you just say that God is powerful and He is the one who made my action take form. So how can my action be my responsibility if it happens within His power? In other words, I am in this universe and He makes everything in this universe function. So you just told me that because He allowed me now to speak, I spoke. So how can I be responsible for the words that He has put on my tongue? Oh, but I have chosen them. I have chosen them. He gave me the choice. He gave me the choice to say something good, but not to say something bad. He gave me the choice to climb the stairs rather than jumping. He gave me the choice. So where does human responsibility start? And where does divine power cover? The scope of divine power in face of what? The scope of human responsibility. If you say that God allows everything, that nothing that happens in this universe without the knowledge of God, how can you then expect a tyrant to be punished for persecuting people? Isn't it? Oh, but he has a human responsibility. Why? Because Allah did not give the donkey the choice between right and wrong, but He gave you. And why do I have to have that? Why do I have to have the choice? Because you're honorable. That's simple. That's simple. Because you're honorable. Do you want to be a donkey? No, I don't want to be a donkey. Right? If you don't want to be a donkey, then the other option is you have a choice. أَلَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُ عَيْنَيْنِ وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَتَيْنِ وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ. That's an honorable thing. You would not feel the taste of success unless you're given the option to fail, right? And then you try, then you go through it. You will not appreciate it. So if He has known where I will end in the end, that I go to Jannah or I go to Hellfire or whatever, why did He not just take me there so that you will feel honorable? But why did He make me honorable? We'll talk about that. So these are the three questions. These are the three scenarios. And following these three questions, we have answers, isn't it? So there is Allah to fulfill the purpose of my creation. There is another life. There are three subsequent questions. So if I now, I agree that there is another life and there is a purpose. How do I know that purpose? Well, I can't just pick up my phone and make a call with Allah and say, tell me what do you want from me? Isn't it? So if the government has decided to establish a new law or new law about parking in Manchester or in Oldham, you can't just call the ministry, but you call your local council, isn't it? So your local council is the representative of the local government. So how do I know? Who can inform me? A prophet. That's why the concept of prophecy comes in Aqeedah. Now, how do I know that prophet is a prophet? Anyone can claim that. So there are qualities related to prophethood that we will be talking about. How does the communication happen? So we talk about revelation. Now, prophets, just human beings like us. They're just human beings like us. And the guidance, the instruction, is supposed to outlive these prophets. Just like laws outlive governments. So how can I know the law after the prophet has passed away? Then there is something called divine scriptures. Divine scriptures, manifestos, that tell us what does God want from us. The role of prophets is that they have taken that, proven to us that they're truthful, given that to us. It is then, after you have believed in Allah, you have believed in afterlife, you have believed in this, and you have believed in prophets, you have believed in the truthfulness, you have believed that they have a code of practice. After the theologian has delivered that to you, then comes the role of the faqih, the jurist. How do I understand from this law what is in it? That's why Aqeedah comes before fiqh. The law of the faqih is subsequent. Why? Because the faqih works on the heritage, the inheritance of a prophet, while the theologian proves prophethood. He proves the purpose of your existence. No one would, as we will study inshallah in the next class, no one will be able to deal with the Quran as a sacred book unless they believe that it is sacred in the first place. Otherwise, if an Orientalist is dealing with the Quran, they're just dealing with a historical narrative, which can be judged against another historical narrative. Unless you believe in the sacredness of the Quran, then everything else is irrelevant. Now, so why do we need Aqeedah then? Why do we need to have all of this? What is this big hassle? First of all, brothers and sisters, why can't we just live a free life? First of all, as I said before, that we have to answer these existential questions, 3 existential questions that we have. Who brought us here? What's the purpose of our existence? And what happens after? It happened that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, that, or whoever has created us, that He has chosen us as viceroys on earth, as individuals who can build the earth and make it a better place to live. We have not heard of a civilization that belonged to any animal. Even little insects, they have their own kingdoms, but they don't build civilizations. They don't leave any intellectual heritage, isn't it? They don't write books about how they build their own civilization. They don't have intellectual discourses where they agree or disagree about ideas. They don't cut themselves into sects and groups siding with truth or not with truth. They don't fight over ownership of land and say, these are my borders, those are your borders. If you want to come into my area, you have to have a representative, and you can replace this representative after a specific term. Only humans do that. To fulfill this role as human beings, humans were endowed with certain qualities. They needed tools to establish their existence as human beings. What are these tools? The first of these tools is intellect. In order to live in this world, we needed intellect. How? We needed knowledge and ability to analyze and learn. How would we build unless we can analyze? Unless we know the relation between a cause and its effect. Unless we know the outcome of certain actions and learn from experience and not repeat these experiences and look at certain things and construct and deconstruct. And we also were endowed with something called acquisitiveness or selfishness. We have a need to acquire. I will not build in someone else's place. I will build only in my own place. I will try to compete with someone. So this ability to own and appropriate. So when I own a place, that's my area, this is my territory, then I defend it and I build in it. I make it a better place to live, and then I start looking at somebody else and competing with them. We were also endowed with power and planning. Yes, we might not have the full power ourselves, but we have the means to have that power. So I might not be able to move a big rock, but I have the ability to invent a machine that enables me to lift it up and move it from one place to another. I might not be able to travel from one side of the world to another side on foot all the time, but I have the ability to shorten that distance by inventing something that is fast. If you look at the train or the plane and you think that this came out as an idea of that little mind, you'll be surprised. But that shows you how powerful human beings are. As that poet says, وَتَحْسَبُ, ascribe it to Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, وَتَحْسَبُ أَنَّكَ جُرْمٌ صَغِيرٌ, you think that you are a small being. وَفِيكَ انطوى الْعَالَمُ الْأَكْبَرُ, but this huge universe is summed up in you. It's summed up in human beings. So you look at the universe around, and the universe is summed up in a human being. All these galaxies and all of these systems to exist in the human being, right? That's why Imam al-Laqani says, فَانظُرْ إِلَى نَفْسِكَ. Then firstly, look at yourself, because you are a summed up universe. You are a miniature. There is microcosmos and there is macrocosmos and microcosmos. You are the microcosmos. We are the microcosmos. Everything is summed up inside us. But then the macrocosmos, the whole thing. Anyway, to fulfill that role, we have to have intellect, selfishness, power and planning, so that we have control, status, hierarchy in the society, domination. Otherwise, without that hierarchy in the society, who is going to be a leader and who is going to follow? Everyone will dismiss what they don't want to do, and they will acquire what they want to do, so nothing will happen. If everyone wants to cook, who is going to eat the food? And if everyone wants to clean, who is going to... So people have different potentials and they have abilities. And as a leader, you will be able to assign everyone to what they are good for. And then that's escorted with emotions. Love, hate, anger. It is your anger that makes you defend. And you can go back to Al-Ghazali, how he speaks about some of these qualities. That in fact, it's impossible. As human beings, it's impossible for us to uproot these qualities. You can't live without anger. And the Sharia doesn't want you to do that. Allah doesn't want you to do that. What Allah wants you to do is to tame it, to train it, so it does not drive you. You drive it. You know when to release it and when not. So a tamed anger is called indignation. To be indignant means to be angry for the righteous reasons, but not to be angry at all. It's impossible. We will not be humans. We will basically be complete neutral, to neutralize our qualities as human beings. We will be completely inanimate. Only a rock, when you hit it, it will not respond, because it doesn't have feelings. So as human beings, we have feelings. To say to someone, you have to get rid of that, it's impossible. So we have all of this. We have intellect, selfishness, power and emotion, love, hate, anger, purpose, isn't it? We can say emotions are to do with what? Purpose. But these qualities can be very dangerous. Why can they be dangerous? Because intellect, knowledge and ability to analyze can lead you to manipulate, can lead you to create things that are really, really dangerous. As much as human beings have invented machines to connect one another, to connect us with each other, they have also invented machines that allow us to spy on each other. While you communicate, there is somebody else who is doing that, tapping into that communication. So it's the same intellect that enabled us to communicate with each other, allowed somebody else to break into our privacies and take information that they are not allowed. So they're stealing. Intellectually, they're stealing from you. As much as the internet has enabled people to communicate knowledge, it has allowed people also to do plagiarism, to steal somebody else's work and take it for themselves. So it's a very dangerous tool. Selfishness. As much as we work hard to earn for our living, but it can also be a very dangerous tool where you just do nothing in your life except earning. Or that your mind, in addition to your selfishness, derive you to own something or to appropriate something that's not yours. Regardless of any moralistic background or consideration. They have just decided, let's finish this. Or what has driven Vietnam War? It's the appropriation that has led the world into World War I, then World War II. Is this appropriation that leads superpowers today to destroy other countries, to push regimes, to topple certain regimes and install new regimes in order to have manipulation and control over certain areas and other areas. So these qualities can be very, very dangerous. So why are they dangerous? They're dangerous because Shaykh Ramadan al-Bouti says they're dangerous because they are the shadows of divine attributes. Allah has power. We have the shadow of the power. Allah has ownership. He is Malik. He is the owner. And we also own. The only difference is we own temporarily. He owns eternally. We have power, but our power is upgradable power. You can upgrade it from your one arm to two arms to a machine. But there is a point where human power cannot help. Yes, you might have the superpowers of the world, but if there is a tsunami, they back out. And excuse me, our systems fail. People can expect. Yes, we have the power of expecting and finding things or spotting things before they exist, right? But no one can expect when cancer can start working on their body. No one can do that. You might have very accurate systems that read your DNA and say this person is possibly can develop such and such type of illness. But all of that is assumption. It might just happen that this person, two individuals who've been analyzed, one develops and the other doesn't develop it. So as human beings, we have these shadows of divine power. But when someone has a shadow, it is like someone who has not studied at all in comparison to someone who has a bit of knowledge. The bit of knowledge is very dangerous because the bit of knowledge makes you think, I know. It's very powerful. It's a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool to speak and then people can listen to you. It's powerful to have authority. Whether it's knowledge or authority. Once you learn, then you can go home and tell your parents, you're allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do this. You tell your community, you can't do this. No, you shouldn't be doing that. That's authority. People associate authority with you. Authority is very dangerous. See, break time? Okay, we'll talk about that after the break, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله صحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين وبعد. So in continuation of what we have mentioned earlier, we can see that it is us then who need Aqeedah. It is us then who need Aqeedah. Because the only way to tame these qualities, these dangerous qualities, is through Aqeedah. Why? It teaches human beings the real status of this universe. If you imagine someone who's being given powers to act as a viceroy or a representative of a manager, and this manager said, you take care of my company while I'm not here, and you have this power and that power and this power, but we understand that these powers are all stemming and coming from the fact that this individual is representing someone else. So that person decided all of a sudden not to carry on as a representative, but to act as the manager himself. And with that comes a lot of deception, Because he deceives himself into believing that he has absolute power. He deceives himself into believing that it is his company. And therefore, there is no accountability. The sense of accountability completely disappears. So what will happen is, he will never know his real status. In other words, he will have no limits to what he does or what she does. Therefore, we, with knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of this universe, and he has the omnipotence, and he has got the power, and he has the absolute control, therefore, our intellect has a purpose. It is not just something that we have acquired by our own selves, but it has a purpose. It's a tool. And this tool has a manual that we can use it with. If we can't use it in accordance to this manual, what will happen? We will damage this tool, or this tool will be very damaging. If someone buys a drill and the drill is very powerful, if you hold it, it might throw you away. If you don't know how to use that drill, you might not only harm your wall, but you might even harm yourself. If someone has an electric saw and it's very dangerous and he doesn't know how to control it, therefore that person can damage themselves. So intellect has a purpose. That power is a tool to protect rights and to establish justice. And that justice starts from oneself. Otherwise, this power will become a means of inflicting harm on others, will be a means of tyranny, and so on and so forth. Selfishness or acquisitiveness is a test, to test where your rights end and where the rights of others start. So it will balance it, it will tame it. Emotions will be balanced. Knowledge will be used to serve the purpose, the higher purpose for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. So we need aqeedah then at the level of an individual to stop harming ourselves. We need aqeedah at the level of society to have a point to refer back to. We live in a society today, they call it postmodern society, isn't it? Postmodern, even though in a very academic way, this is controversial. There is a big controversy whether postmodernism has started or we continue to live in the modern world. The modern world is a world that started from 1800 or late 1700. It's started with two big events. One is called the French Revolution, and the other is called the Industrial Revolution. One is a political revolution, the other is an economic one. And with these two revolutions, what happened is we started to live in a world that decided to give power to the secular over the sacred. In the pre-modern world, there was power for the sacred over the secular. In the Muslim world, there was always a balance. But it just happened in the West that the sacred was overpowering the secular. And in response to that, as a reaction to that, the secular decided, let me breathe. So it decided, I am no more going to be persecuted by the sacred. I am going to take the upper hand. Muslims, unfortunately, started to fall into that. Why? Because it just happened with the success of the political revolution, the French Revolution, and the economic revolution, the Industrial Revolution. This part of the world, Europe, has become very powerful, materialistically. Materialistically, very powerful. It gave its attention to one side. How can we grow materially? But it has taken its eyes away from another side, which is what? Morality, spiritually. So it has grown weaker in morality, and spirituality has grown higher in what? In power and politics and so on and so forth. But not only that, it has made political and economic power into a belief, into a dogma. into a message to go around the world and say to people, listen, you are decadent because you are not politically and economically strong. Let's teach you. So they proselytized that in America. And unfortunately, driven by that, they started manipulating other parts of the world. They colonized different places. They subjugated the resources of these places to build the economic power of Europe, and so on and so forth. Muslims, unfortunately, after a while, they decided that since we are weak and Europe is strong, the only way to be strong is to adopt these two changes, to do political change through revolution and to do economic change through adopting these systems. So they tried different economic options. One option was communism. So they tried communism. It failed. And then they tried capitalism, open market policy, universal capitalism, and so on and so forth. They tried like loads and loads and loads of things. But they, in the middle of all of this is what we call the what? The modern world. But what happened is they did not only try capitalism separately, because capitalism is a product of a society that it has grown in. So they wanted to take the whole package. So they took the whole package, the moral package along with the economic package. So let's adopt everything that has been somewhere else. And unfortunately, we didn't manage to compete in economy, but we managed to compete in low morality. Right? So we live in that world where there is no definition of anything. They call it liquid world. There is liquidity. So we don't know what is true and what is false. So Aqeedah helps us in creating or in having a reference point that we go back to and say why wrong is wrong and why right is right. So it tells us there is an objective truth. We live in a world that tells us there is nothing called objective truth. There is what? There is subjectivity. We live in a world that is ruled by subjectivity. What you believe is true is true. I might believe that what you believe is wrong and what I believe is right. I'm also entitled to that. Well, but entitlement does not mean that there is no truth out there. What is being presented is, no, there is no truth out there. What you want to believe is a human being creates reality. Does that make sense? Like, so what is being promoted now is what? A human being creates reality. You are the one who decides what reality is. But in terms of faith, we say, no. God is the one who makes reality. As human beings, we have limited knowledge with which we explore reality. We might reach the right conclusion or we might be wrong. But there is no way that we can all be true at the same time if we describe reality in different ways. If I say this is a book and you say this is not a book, this is an iPad, it can't be. There has to be one of them right. What we are entitled to do is, you're entitled to prove your point. You make a claim. I'm entitled to prove my point. I make a claim. In certain situations, we can judge. But in certain other situations, we cannot judge. In metaphysical truths, none of us can judge. I can try to approximate it to you, to prove it to you. At the end, the one who judges between people is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Especially when it comes to... So now, what does Aqeedah provide us with? It provides us with felicity and happiness and relaxation in this world and the hereafter. In fact, we need it. For our world to function in a good way, it needs Aqeedah. To function in a balanced way. Now, this is the introduction that I wanted to introduce the text with. I'm now going to go back to the traditional way of saying who Imam al-Sanusi is. Anyone has an idea of who's Imam al-Sanusi? No one, right. So his name is Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Umar ibn Yusuf. So I know that possibly after the classes people have no strong memory to memorize names, but it will be always important to bear the names in mind. His name is what? Is Muhammad ibn Umar. It's quite simple. Muhammad ibn Yusuf ibn Umar. Muhammad ibn Yusuf ibn Umar ibn Shu'aib al-Sanusi. The whole family, al-Sanusi family, they call Bani Sanus. They are ashraf, which means they can trace their lineage back to Imam al-Hasan radiyallahu anhu. The word Sharif is sometimes used to refer to the descendants of Imam al-Hasan and sometimes used to refer to the descendants of Imam al-Hussein. Those who use it to refer to Imam al-Hasan's descendants, they would use for the other branch of the prophetic household the word Sayyid. And those who use it to refer to the descendants of Imam al-Hussein, they will use for the Hassanis, Sayyid. And those who don't make a difference between both, they can refer to both as Sayyid and Sharif. You might imagine that this is an irrelevant discussion, but it is. There is actually books on the differentiation between as-Sayyid and as-Sharif. Anyway, Imam al-Sanusi, Muhammad ibn Yusuf ibn Umar ibn Shu'aib al-Sanusi, his family or his tribe, Bani Sanus, they originally come from North Africa. He was born 832 and he died 895. So he lived exactly 63 years, isn't it? So 832, then he was born 895. It is important to visualize, that's possibly the easiest way, to visualize Muslim generations. If you draw a map of Muslim generations from the prophetic time to our time today, you make a box and you say, okay, these are the people who were passed away. You can decide whether by birth or by death. Possibly death is better. So those are the people who died before 100. Those are the people who died before 200. Those are the people who died before 300. Those are the people who died before 400. Those are the people who died before 500. Those are the people who died before 600. So anyone who died before 900, you will know. So they must have died 800 and something. From 801 to 899. So the last Sahabi passed away in which year? Anyone has an idea? About 120. 120, they say. About 120. That's the last Sahabi. Possibly Sayyidina Wathil ibn al-Asqa. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, or 110, I'm mistaken. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam had a group of Sahaba. He said, in 100 years from now, none of the people who are here will be alive. So the last Sahabi died 110. Imam Abu Hanifa is counted as a tabi'i because he must have met some Sahaba. Imam Abu Hanifa was born in the year 80. And he died 150. So 150 was the birth of al-Shafi'i. That's now we are in the second 100. Al-Shafi'i died into the third 100. So he died 204. 204. So he died into the third 100. We're looking by the end. In that stage from 200 till 300, also Ahmed ibn Hanbal died, 241. And the students of al-Shafi'i lived and died. 270, Rabi' ibn Sulaim al-Muradi, 271, the son of al-Shafi'i. And then you go into 300. Past 300 is Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, Abu Mansur al-Maturidi. That's the stage when things started to take form. Malik died 179 and he was born 93. So Malik, even though he was born 93, he was too young to meet many of the Sahaba, right? He was too young to meet many of the Sahaba. Anyway, so we have reached 300. So past 300, we have got people like Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari and Abu Mansur al-Maturidi. And then later, 400, you have got the beginning of 400, and past 400, you've got al-Ghazali. 450, al-Ghazali was born. And then al-Juwayni, that stage. You can see that link, al-Juwayni, al-Ghazali. Who else? Yes, that stage as well. And then you go into 500. So 500 you have al-Ghazali, and you have Many other people. 500 corresponds to 1000 CE. Right? So Al-Ghazali was you always measure it in that way. We are in 1500 and 2000. Right? So always measure it by what? By 500 years, if you want to make the link. So Al-Ghazali was, they said Al-Ghazali, I think he died in 1111. It's kind of a very distinctive date. Right? They said Akan Tawheed. He's the most monotheistic number in history. 1111. Right? And then you go into 600. The 600 was the birth of An-Nawawi, the Shafi'i, Ibn al-Hajib and Khalil, and these contemporaries. This stage in history is a stage where the ulum started to kind of settle down. And then we have 700. In 700 we have people like Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. And Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani was born, but he died after 800. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani died 852. So we can now understand how al-Sanusi is influential and what his status in knowledge is. Because you normally measure the status of a person by looking at his peers in knowledge. Who was alive at his time? If that person lived at a certain stage in history and he could prove himself, therefore that person will be accredited by his contemporaries. Al-Sanusi, he was born 832. He died 895. 895, that means he was a contemporary of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. At least for 20 years. Because Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani died 852, right, for 20 years. And who else took from Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani? Al-Suyuti, Al-Hafiz al-Suyuti, and Al-Imam al-Sakhawi. So these two, Al-Imam al-Suyuti rahimahullah ta'ala died in 911. He was born around 831. So al-Suyuti, he was a contemporary, this man was a contemporary of al-Suyuti. Right? So, Imam al-Sanusi rahimahullah ta'ala, he was born in the Algerian city of Tlemcen, which is a city in North Algeria that exists to this day. And he studied firstly with his father. So his father was a scholar, but he was possibly not of a high caliber scholarship, not as famous as his son. And he traveled, as it was the case with many people at the time. So amongst the people he traveled to study with is a great mufassir of the Quran called al-Imam Abu Abdurrahman al-Tha'alibi. Tafsir al-Tha'alibi, Tafsir of Imam al-Tha'alibi, is known to be a well-regarded tafsir. So he studied with al-Tha'alibi and al-Imam al-Taluti and al-Imam Ibrahim ibn Muhammad ibn Ali al-Tazi. In any way, we can say that al-Sanusi rahimahullah studied with the people in his region. It is not mentioned in his biography that he studied or traveled to Egypt, for example, or traveled to distant lands, but he studied with the people, the scholars of his region. However, the scholars of the region and beyond who have read his works have testified to his knowledge. So there is a man called al-Imam al-Habti. He is known for his book on wuquf, on the stops of the Quran. He says, كلام السنوسي محفوظ من السقطات. What he says, what al-Sanusi says, is free, is protected from slips. Meaning he is very well versed in what he says. And another person, another scholar called Musa ibn Uqda, says, ما رأيت من غربل هذا العلم مثل هذا الرجل. I have not seen someone who sifted this knowledge, meaning Aqeedah, is referring to Aqaid, Tawheed. I have not seen someone who sifted this knowledge as much as al-Sanusi did. And this word, this sentence is very significant. Why? Because this man, Imam al-Sanusi, most of his writings, that's something I noticed in his biography, most of his writings are on Aqeedah. It's pretty much the case that even though he wrote about different things, we will see, he wrote like loads and loads of works, but it is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has protected him and preserved him only for aqeedah, that he did not complete many of the other works that he started. So he started a work on tafsir, but he didn't complete it. He started a work on qira'at, he didn't complete it. He started a few works in fiqh, something, a sharh, a commentary on a book called al-Waghlisiyya, al-Muqaddimah al-Waghlisiyya, the Waghlisi introduction, which I think is available in English. Al-Waghlisi introduction is like a primer in Maliki school, but he didn't complete the commentary on it. He started a commentary on Mukhtasar Ibn al-Hajib, the summary of Ibn al-Hajib in Maliki fiqh as well. He did not complete it. He started a commentary on Mukhtasar Ibn Arafa's summary on logic, and he also didn't complete it. He wrote on loads of subjects, but he didn't complete it. But now if we look at Aqeedah, we realize that this man has, as Ibn Uqda says, has sifted this science. So al-Sanusi wrote for us 6 books related to Aqeedah. One of them is called Al-Kubra, Al-Aqeedah Al-Kubra. It's known, the title is Aqeedah Ahli Tawheed wa Tasdeed, Al-Mukhrijatu min Dhulumat al-Jahli wa Rabqat al-Taqleed. The Aqeedah of the people of Tawheed and success that saves you, that takes you out from the darknesses of ignorance and the yoke of imitation. Al-Murghimatu anfa kulli mubtadi'in anid, that will humble the nose of every innovator and every refuser. That's called Al-Aqeedah Al-Kubra of al-Sanusi, and he wrote a commentary on it. So he wrote the Aqeedah and he wrote a commentary on it. And then he summed it up. He made it smaller and lighter in language and structure, and he selected from it what would suit a kind of a more grassroots audience. So he wrote another book called Al-Aqeedah Al-Wusta, the intermediate Aqeedah. So he wrote the Kubra first, and then he went into, this is very important, brothers and sisters, because they say that scholars grow easier as they grow older. They don't grow difficult. Normally when someone, we say in English, a new broom sweeps clean. But after a while you realize that the broom becomes what? Softer. This has been used for so long. So when the scholars grow older, they become more accessible. Why? Because they have sifted knowledge, digested it, and broke it down, and now they can present it in their own language. But when someone is new to knowledge, he doesn't have too much vocabulary. He doesn't have too much terminology. He's borrowing. Possibly he's borrowing something and it is as it is. He doesn't know what to replace it with. There is a book I read recently by C.S. Lewis called The Screw Tape Letters. C.S. Lewis makes some interesting remarks there. He says, only a novice makes claims. Only a novice makes claims. The new one is the one. And he says, a starter priest is the most pedantic. The most pedantic and the most insane is the starter priest. Why? He only knows that. That's the letter of the text. But there is other solution. There is another side for things. He doesn't know it's just one interpretation. So Imam Sanusi rahimahullah started from writing to the elite, writing to the professional. And then he went a bit down. Okay, let me give that benefit to a larger crowd. So he wrote Al-Aqeedah Al-Wusta, and he wrote a sharh on it, a commentary on it. And then he went and wrote this text that we are studying, al-Barahin, the mother of proofs. al-Barahin, or what we call Al-Aqeedah Al-Sughra. So this is supposed to address larger crowd than the crowd addressed by Al-Aqeedah Al-Wusta. And Al-Aqeedah Al-Wusta is supposed to address larger crowd than Al-Aqeedah Al-Kubra. But he didn't stop there. So he didn't only stop on writing
Al-Aqeedah al-Sughra and the commentary on it, but he wrote something called Sughra al-Sughra. So al-Sughra, and then we have Sughra al-Sughra. This is Sharh al-Sughra, with the same Sharh, but with the Hashia of Shaykh al-Islam Ibrahim al-Bajuri. But there is even Sughra al-Sughra with some Hawashi, much smaller. In Sughra al-Sughra, he basically comes and he says, every mukallaf needs to believe in Allah and His Messenger. Something like that. It's very, very brief. But then underneath that, he goes into a bit of depth. But why did he write Sughra al-Sughra? It's very interesting. One of the students of al-Sanusi is a man called Muhammad ibn Umar al-Malali. And Muhammad ibn Umar al-Malali was his closest student. He wrote his own biography for him. He studied with him for the longest period. So Muhammad ibn Umar al-Malali says that when al-Sanusi taught his father, Muhammad ibn Umar's father, he taught my father, he said, when he taught my father al-Sughra, he realized that it is very difficult for my father, due to old age, to memorize and understand it. So he wrote for him Sughra al-Sughra. So he actually wrote Sughra al-Sughra to the father of one of his students who could not, because of old age, have time and power to memorize. That indicates how knowledge surrounded and covered by mercy leads to the service of the society. And not only that, but after he finished Sughra al-Sughra and he wrote the Sharh on it as usual, he wrote a sixth text, or actually a fifth text. So he has Al-Kubra, Al-Wusta, Al-Sughra, Sughra al-Sughra, and he has Sughra al-Sughra. He said, this is for Al-Niswan wa-Sibyan. This is for children and women, meaning uneducated women. Women who are in the street. That actually shows you how central was knowledge in the Muslim society, and shows you how far we are from that when we deprive our families and a lady who is a housewife and say, you can't even know the basics of your religion. How is she supposed then to teach children anything? How can she be a role model? How can she teach her daughters? How can she teach her children? We say in Arabic, al-ummu madrasa. Mother is like a school. إذا أعددتها, if you prepare the school very well, then how many people do come out of school and serve in the society? Pretty much all the society goes through school. Right? So if you prepare the school very well, you will be preparing the society. You'll be preparing people. So Imam al-Sanusi rahimahullah ta'ala, in the end, he said, let me now do this massive religious literacy project. How? I'm going to write the aqaid, because even women in the street, even women at home, they can teach their children the very basics of, if you go to Mauritania and many traditional societies, most of the shuyukh who are highly respected, they will tell you that they memorize the very basic text by the repetition their mother has used to repeat that text in front of them, like bedtime stories. So their bedtime stories was texts that they actually memorized from their parents, right? Especially the mother. So he wrote Sughra. They call it al-Aqeedah al-Wajiza, the most summarized Aqeedah. The most summarized Aqeedah. Sughra, for the children and for women. Basically, for women who are not interested even in seeking knowledge. So in fact, in Muslim societies, no one was exempt from knowledge. No one was exempt from knowledge. You want it or you don't want it, knowledge was not essential for growth in position or a career, but it was a necessary for the growth as a human being. That's who you are. Now, we'll talk about this later, because that gives us an insight to understand the difference between the traditional world, the role of knowledge in the traditional world, and the role of knowledge in modern world. Because modern world knowledge is a is dealt with in a very utilitarian way. So we study to graduate, to have a job, to have a career. Therefore, our career and the payment of that career and the respect of that career decides which specialization we should choose. So it's the first thing. Now, knowledge is not an aim, it's a tool. So it's chosen based on what am I getting out of this? I'm going to spend X amount of time in studying this. Therefore, there are certain things that do not have any physical implications, like studying religious knowledge. In a secular world, religious knowledge is not a good coin. It's not a good currency. So why should we study it? So people drift away and they will go and study something that is more materialistic and beneficial for them. While in the traditional world, people sought knowledge because knowledge is what makes you a human being. So regardless of how much time. The other thing is, knowledge was not related. Graduation was not related with the job. There was something called awqaf, endowment, which supported people who are seekers of knowledge. Nowadays, we do have endowments, but these endowments have been shifted to empiricist knowledge, or what we call science. So you've got funds to support research in science, but there is no funds to research in what makes human beings better human beings, but what makes the world a better place to live. So that's a complete shift in the purpose of knowledge, the method of knowledge, the choice of knowledge, and the use of knowledge, and so on and so forth. Anyway, Imam al-Sanusi rahimahullah ta'ala was a man who filled his time with ibadah and with knowledge. They mention that he used to pray after Salat al-Subh, he would sit for his awrad, and then he would teach up till duha time. And then he will stand by the door of his house, answer people's questions, and then when he finishes Salat al-Zuhr and finishes the nafil after Salat al-Zuhr, he would teach till Asr. And then after Asr he would go home and read his awrad, post-Asr awrad. And then he would come for Salat al-Maghrib, do his nafil till Isha, and then he would teach a bit after Isha, and go home, have a bit of sleep, and he will wake up and continue his study or reflection till Salat al-Fajr. I will mention only two people or among the students of Imam al-Sanusi. One of them might not be well known to you. His name is Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn al-Abbas al-Tilimsani. He was a grammarian. But the second one, I'm sure some of you must have heard. Who has heard of Imam Zarruq? There is Zarruq. Anyone has heard of Zarruq? Yes. Imam Zarruq, Abu al-Abbas, Ahmed ibn Muhammad ibn Isa al-Burnusi. Zarruq was one of the shuyukh of the Shazili Tariqa, and he was a great Maliki faqih, and was a arif billah. So his commentary, he wrote 31 commentaries on the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah secondary. He told the Hikam in different places. So Zarruq rahimahullah died in 859, and he was one of the students of Imam al-Sanusi rahimahullah. Right. So that takes us to the end of this commentary. I'm going now to, in these remaining 10 minutes, I'm going to read what he said, and I hope inshallah that next time you will have the Arabic, so I'm going just to read through it. So he says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. الحمد لله الواسع الجود والعطاء الذي شهدت بوجوب وجوده ووحدانيته وعظيم جلاله وجوب افتقار الكائنات كلها إليه في الأرض والسماء. He says, praise is due to Allah, the one whose gifts and giving are magnificent, the one whose existence, the necessity of his existence and his oneness and majesty have been proven by the need of all creation in heavens and earth to him. This introduction, as we will see later on, we call it حسن الابتداء أو براعة الاستهلال. حسن الابتداء أو براعة الاستهلال is a rhetorical method in which you start a text or a book, a specific subject, by pointing indirectly to what you're writing about. So if you are writing on grammar, for example, you will be using grammatical terms in their linguistic sense to indicate that this is what I'm going to speak about. If you're using, if you're writing on tajweed, for example, you will be using tajweed terminology that in that different sense in order to indicate. So he says here, first thing is that the subject matter of Aqeedah is to prove the existence of Allah. So he has already given us a proof. That's the proof. The proof of the existence of Allah is that everything is in need of Him. Need. What's the proof? That's a proof. We will study later on amongst the proofs of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the existence of our Creator, is need. If someone is in need, that means his existence is potential. Therefore, we need someone who can actualize our potential and therefore give us our existence. That's the proof. الذي عز في ملكه عن أن يكون له شريك في تدبير شيء ما. That he is magnificent, that he does not need someone to manage things along with him. So that's another proof. The proof of the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is proven by the fact that he doesn't need someone else. Otherwise, if he needed, his might would be efficient, and if it is deficient, then he is in need. فتعالى الله عز وجل عن الشركاء الرحيم الرحمن. And then he continues to say, فلا يستطاع شكر نعمه إلا بما هو من نعمه الجماء. You cannot thank him for his blessings except by blessings that he has endowed upon you. You can thank Allah with a blessing, for a blessing, except with a blessing. In other words, if you say Alhamdulillah, the fact that he has given you the tawfiq to say Alhamdulillah is a blessing. You're thanking him for a blessing by inflicting a new blessing. Imam al-Shafi'i says that you cannot thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough. Why? As the Prophet ﷺ said, لا أحصي ثناء عليك. We always repeat this word, I don't know its meaning. لا أحصي ثناء عليك means I cannot thank you, I cannot encompass thanking you. Because if you say Alhamdulillah, well, you have had a good opportunity then to thank him. So he rewards you for saying Alhamdulillah. So how can you then, you have not paid the first debt to be in credit. We are always in what? In debt. We are never in what? In credit. فَلَا يُسْتَطَاعُ شُكْرُ نِعَمِهِ. So he is teaching us here that human beings are always in need, meaning they cannot be independent or self-subsistent, which is something that's discussed. فَلَا وُصُولَ إِلَى شَيْءٍ مِّن فَضْلِهِ إِلَّا بِمَحْضِ فَضْلِهِ. You cannot reach his bounty except by his bounty, him giving you bounty. So what does that mean? Or how is that relevant to Tawheed? We will be studying later on something called that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not obliged to do anything. He is not obliged to put those who live a life of righteousness into Jannah, nor those who live a life of deviance into hellfire. Allah does not have to. If He puts you in Jannah, it is by His complete bounty and grace. If He puts you in hellfire, it's by His complete justice and fairness. Why is that? He says, تَنَزَّهَ رَبُّنَا عَنِ الْأَغْرَاضِ. Allah is far transcended from purposes. What do you mean by that? When I do you a favor, it's for a purpose. It's a motive. There is a motive. What's the motive behind me doing you a favor? I want you to thank me. I want you to give me some credit. I want you to love me. Right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's actions are not motivated. And because they are not motivated, therefore, He is free from motive. And if He is free from motive, He can, for Him, our obedience and our disobedience are the same. But is my respect and disrespect for you the same? Yeah, definitely not. Why? Because your action is motivated. Allah's actions are not motivated. Therefore, we don't understand sometimes we find it difficult. How can someone live a life of righteousness and Allah puts him in hellfire? Because Allah's actions are not motivated. He didn't give him, when you do good deeds to, when you're not doing good deeds to Allah, you're doing good deeds to yourself. Right? So he continues to talk about that. And then he says, Rahimahullah, وَنَشْهَدُ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ شَهَادَةً نَشَأَتْ عَنْ مَحْضِ الْيَقِينِ. We bear witness that there is no God except Allah. That's a witness that has been established, emerged from pure certitude. We were just talking about what? Certitude. That you cannot witness unless there is what? Certitude. So he is referring to a topic that he will discuss later on, the topic of taqleed. Can we imitate? Can we just say La ilaha illallah without knowing the realities of La ilaha illallah? And then he talks later on, and he said, شهادة ندخرها لما قسم الظهور وأذاب الأكباد. We make that witness of that our messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. شهادة ندخرها لما قسم الظهور والأكباد. This, we save this witness for the breakers of backs. What will break the backs? He says من أهوال القيامة, from the troubles of Qiyamah. So we save this witness for what? The troubles of Qiyamah. So he's referring to prophetic intercession. He links prophetic presence to prophetic intercession, because that's mabhath, that's something that is discussed later on. And then he continues and he says, فَصَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, may Allah's blessings and peace be upon him, مِنْ رَسُولٍ أَلْقَتْ إِلَيْهِ الْمَحَاسِنُ وَالْمَفَاخِرُ كُلُّهَا مَقَالِدًا. Like he is such a messenger to whom good qualities and pride has given themselves to. So he talks about the perfection of prophethood. And then he says, فَسَمَا إِلَىٰ أَعْلَى مَنَصَّتِهَا. So he is on the highest pulpit of it. بِحَيْثُ لَا مَطْمَعَ لِمَخْلُوقٍ, that nobody else can even aspire to achieve such a high status. What is that high status? That's the great intercession of the Prophet ﷺ. Right. And then he says, وَبَعْدُ, after that introduction. So in his introduction, he touches upon a few subjects that he will talk about. After that he says, وَبَعْدُ فَأَهَمُّ مَا يَشْتَغِلُ بِهِ الْعَاقِلُ الَّذِينَ. The most important thing that an intelligent person can keep himself busy with في هذا الزمان الصعب, in this difficult time, أن يسعى فيما ينقذ به موجته من الخلود في النار. To strive to learn what saves you from hellfire. So he's highlighting the importance of Aqeedah. Because instead of saying the most important thing that a person should strive to learn at this time is Aqeedah. Because Aqeedah will strengthen your Iman. And if it strengthens your Iman, you will be able to live a life of righteousness. And that will save you from hellfire. Isn't that? So he has like ellipses. You know what ellipses is? Removal of things, and then he goes directly to the conclusion. Because that suits the language of this text, because this is supposed to be what? A summary. So he will not say, the most important thing is to learn Aqeedah. And since Aqeedah can help you in this and this and this and this and this and this, therefore you should learn it. He just said, what you should do at this time is to save yourself from hellfire. And how do we do that? And here he has put the motive before the action. He has put the motive, the purpose before the action. So he didn't say study Aqeedah and then. He has put the fruit before the action. And that suits people who are beginners. You normally say to your child, I will give you this if you do that. It should have been, if you do this, I will give you that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses that with beginners. وَادْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةِ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. You have access to paradise because of your action. He would have said, بِأَعْمَالِكُمْ تَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةِ. By your action, you will go to paradise. But we normally put the fruit as an incentive, as an encouragement for someone who is childish, who is a beginner. So he said, you want to be saved, this is what you need to learn. He said, وَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا بِإِتْقَانِ عَقَائِدِ التَّوْحِيدِ. Now, why is it important to learn? Because it saves us. Now, what are the challenges that make Aqeedah even more important? He said, because we live at a time, he said, رَمَى فِي كُلِّ نَاحِيَةٍ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ بِأَمْوَاجِ إِنْكَارِ الْحَقِّ وَبُغْضِ أَهْلِهِ وَتَزْيِينِ الْبَاطِلِ. That we live in a world which is dominated by denial of truth, إنكار الحق, and secondly, بُغْضِ أَهْلِهِ, hating its people, and thirdly, تَزْيِينِ الْبَاطِلِ, beautifying falsehood. So these are three things. One is saying that truth is not true, making it look strange. Ankara in Arabic means two things: to deny and to make someone feel strange. So for example, if someone has lost extreme amount of weight and he hasn't been seen for a long time, and you see him, you say, is that you? That question is called inkar. Because you're almost like rejecting the fact that you're in disbelief, right? In complete disbelief. So they say, لو رأيتني لأنكرتني. If you see me, you will think you will not recognize me. Therefore you say, no, that can't be. If you see your beloved ones after they pass away and their body decomposes, تنكره, right? So inkar, hadith al-munkar, in Salih hadith, al-hadith al-munkar is a hadith which disagrees with a more well-known hadith by more authentic people. So it's narrated by someone. They say, وَفِيهِ نَكَارَ. This hadith, like, I can't believe it. So this time that we live in is a time when truth looks very strange, looks unbelievable. While it should be believable, but it's not. People disbelieve in truth. Is it like that? The Prophet ﷺ said, "What? بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود غريبا." That at the end of time, Islam will be very strange. Meaning, people will look at it. How can you be honest at a time when honesty is not seen as a favorable thing? If you act modestly, that's very strange at the time when modesty is not acceptable at all. So inkar al-haq, making truth sound, feel, وَبُغْضِ أَهْلِهِ, and hating the people who love truth, but demonizing them, pretending that they're backward. What do you want? You want us to go back to this world where there was persecution and religion dominated, where dogmas and myths dominated minds? And thirdly, تزيين الباطل, beautifying falsehood. Remember, the falsehood by itself is what? Is ugly. But in order to sell it to people, it has to be packaged very nice. So he said, now we need Aqeedah because this is the only thing that will save us. Why? Because it will give us, it will navigate us. And then he said, وَمَا أَسْعَدَ اليوم من وفق لتحقيق عقائد الإيمان. Like the really felicit and successful one is the person who can verify the beliefs. ثم عرف بعد ذلك ما يضطر إليه من فروع دينه. Look at that. First, you verify your belief. Second, you know what is necessary from the furu'. What is furu'? The branches. What are branches? Fiqh. So first, he's telling us that you need to study aqaid and then learn fiqh. ثم اعتزل الخلق. Then he separates himself from people. That's tasawwuf. So people cannot reach ihsan without fiqh. And they cannot reach fiqh without the intiqal. And that's the tasalsul. This is the chain. Right. And then he says, رحمه الله تعالى, وقد ألهم مولانا بفضله وعظيم جوده. Allah has inspired me by his grace لما من معرفة عقائد الإيمان بما تحتاج إليه من قواطع البرهان. He says, Allah has inspired me to put together the basic tenets of belief, but adding to them قواطع البرهان, decisive proofs. So just knowing that Aqeedah al-Iman is not enough. Is that I have managed by the grace of Allah to put together the basic beliefs associated with the definitive proofs. And he said, these definitive proofs, even though they might be very obvious, but the most obvious is the most ambiguous. We live at a time when we have to prove the most obvious. So you see, the most obvious is what? Is the most ambiguous. They say, من أشكال المشكلات إيضاح الواضحات. If you have to explain something that is very obvious, it is very difficult. Why? Because you never think of it this way. That's why when I ask you, what's knowledge? People were dazzled. Knowledge. It's just knowledge. Knowledge is to know. No, but that's called dawah. This is called circularity. You can't define knowledge by knowledge. You have to define it by something outside it. Anyway, he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, because these aqeedah, these basics, are so clear that people who have knowledge but they don't have that basic knowledge, they might fall into mistakes. He said, لِتَحْقِيقِ أُمُورٍ قَدْ ابْتُلِيَ بِالْغَلَطِ فِيهَا. Allah has helped me to verify certain parts of knowledge that those who can never be thought of as falling into mistake have fallen into mistake in. مِمَّنْ عُرِفَ بِكَثْرَةِ الْحِفْظِ وَالْإِتْقَانِ. Amongst those who are known for their massive memorization and perfection. Some people might be perfect, where he's basically saying, كثرة الحفظ, massive memorization, لا تعصم من الخطأ, does not save you from mistakes. In other words, you might find a person who is hafiz, has memorized a lot of mutun, a lot of texts, and a lot of books, but that does not save him from making mistakes. How is that relevant to us today? Some people become very dazzled when they hear that so-and-so who is a hafiz of the Quran became an atheist. Remember, كثرة الحفظ لا تعصم من الخطأ. Massive memorization doesn't save you from mistakes. So we have to verify the basics. In our madrasas, we had that discussion. We focus on hifz al-Quran, but we don't focus on teaching the children how can they prove for themselves, or how can they make sense of their basic iman, that they are able to respond. Finally, and this is the conclusion, inshallah ta'ala, he included in this introduction, rahimahullah ta'ala, three essential things. We have something called al-Mabadi al-Ashara. Have you heard of that before? That every science has 10 principles, 10 things that we know about. And by the way, amongst the people who wrote on the al-Mabadi al-Ashara and other things is al-Sanusi as well, al-Muqaddimat, the introduction. So he mentions al-Mabadi al-Ashara, the first 10 principles of every science. They say, مَنْ رَامَ فَنًّا فَلْيُقَدِّمْ أَوَّلًا عِلْمًا بِحَدِّهِ وَمَوْضُوعٍ تَلَا. So whoever wants to study anything, he needs to know, what is this? So that's the definition. What's the subject of it? What am I going to study there? It's the subject matter. And then he should also know who has put the rules and the body of that ilm together, and he should know what is the fruit of that. What am I going to get? Of the 10 principles, and I'm not going to talk about the 10 principles, of the 10 principles, 3 are essential. The definition, the benefit, and the subject matter. And he mentioned here, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned the definition of Aqeedah, that it is that which gives us definitive proofs of the existence of our Lord and the truthfulness of our messenger. And he told us also that the subject matter of this is the existence of Allah and the truthfulness of his messenger and the akhirah. And he told us that the benefit of this, the fruit of this, is that it saves us from fire, and it saves us from shak, from doubt in matters of our faith. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.